Hello, BookTube. I come to you in the middle of yet another bleak and barren Sunday when there are no books in the mail. Yesterday I got 30. The day before that I got 25. It's been a very bullish week for books in the mail, but none today. So I thought I would console myself in my usual way with a book tag. This is called the Bookish Scenarios Tag. I'm afraid to say I don't quite remember where I first saw it. Uh, it's a tag that imagines scenarios, some of which book people will be familiar with, others that they hopefully will never encounter. I thought we'd get right in it. It's not many questions. Number one, you have to get rid of all your books, and you can only keep one book from each of these genres. The first one being contemporary. And I well, this will come as no surprise to you all. There isn't a contemporary book, a novel, which I'm sure is what's meant here, that I would want to keep above all others. They're made up stories. They just don't work on me the way I suspect they work on the rest of you. But as far as contemporary literature goes, if we just broaden it to include nonfiction, that would be this, Occasional Prose by the great Mary McCarthy, who is now almost completely forgotten. Her great novels are hanging on by their fingernails, and this is nonfiction. This is her essays and reviews are gone. That's gone completely. That's a terrible shame because she's a heck of a writer. Next category would be nonfiction. I'm a little bit dismayed by how many times I have seen booktubers answer this category with the Bible. I have the mother of all spoiler warnings for those booktubers, but I won't get into it. Instead, I would probably just lump this with the first one and include it as Mary McCarthy. Just nonfiction would be her. Although I should hurry to point out there's a lot of different kinds of nonfiction. No fiction fan would phrase the question that way, but and then you get to make up your own category. And for own category, I thought I would choose the classics because I can't imagine life without them. And of course, the one I would pick would be the Odes of Horace, the Roman poet Horace, whose occasion I urge you to make. This is the David Ferry translation, but all English translations are more or less going to get you closer. The real way is to do it in Latin. But if you can't do that, Horace is a friend. He's not just a dusty old classical author. He's a friend you'll make and keep for life. There are lots of other categories that we could include, but we'll stop it with that. Question number two. You're at the bookstore, and you hear a teenager telling their mom they don't like to read, but their mom insists they pick something and get it anyway. You walk over and recommend a book you think is great for people who aren't big on reading. What book is it? Well, first of all, props to the mom in this hypothetical. But second, I have been in this scenario many, many times. I've worked in bookstores for a long, long time. And I was never much for the actual work involved. The stocking shelves, the making displays. I was pretty much only there to be at an information desk and talk about books and make recommendations. And I've had this category of customer before who isn't a book person and just happens to wind up at a bookstore. And so I can say with some authority that only bad book recommenders have a book ready to answer this question. The question isn't about whether or not the teen involved likes to read. The question is about the teen personally, themselves. Reading is intensely personal. There's no one-size-fits-all book. So my answer to this question is a bit of a cheat. I would sit them down and talk to them about what they like to read. What's the last thing they like to read? What are some other forms of arts or entertainment they like? And make a carefully calibrated recommendation based on those answers. For adults, it's a little easier. You have to assume that adults will have read something in their lives. So, for an adult, who's, having bad luck with reading, I might pick something, a surefire thing, like World War Z or The Killer Angels by Michael Shara. But for a teen, it's ever so much more important at that age. You have to get it right. Question number three. You're not feeling yourself and need a pick-me-up. Which book do you read and put yourself in a good mood? And I will attribute it to my spotty upbringing, that every time I heard a booktuber answer this question, I was only concentrating on the fact that they were talking about feeling themselves. But that's not where the emphasis is supposed to go. I know perfectly well what the question means, and for me, the answer would be P.G. Wodehouse every time. There's no way that he can fail. Question number 4. You go back in time to your teenage years. What book would you be most likely to catch yourself reading? In my case, it would be the heaviest hardcover, and I wouldn't be reading it. I'd be using it to beat the head of my latest victim. Talk about dark ages. Question number 5. Your friend surprises you with a 4-day trip, and you have 1 hour to pack. Which book do you bring to read on the way? Well, first of all, props to the friend in this hypothetical. But second, for me, the book would be Shakespeare. And it wouldn't be just to read on the way. It would be to read the whole time, because travel can be a bit tedious. But of course, I hasten to point out I wouldn't be using this. I would be using my iPad, which would have all of Shakespeare and also room for me to annotate a whole 10,000 words if I wanted to. Carrying a book while traveling. So 20th century. Let's see. Question number 6. Your house has been robbed. Everything is safe, but your bookshelf has been raided. What's the book you really hope is safe? Well, first of all, props to the burglar in this question. But for me, it would be irreplaceable books. I have a handful of irreplaceable books, chapbooks that were made just for me, books that were signed or annotated, especially. I've got a couple of annotations with annotations all throughout the book by authors who wrote it and who are no longer alive. And also a journal that my father kept when he was in the Air Force during World War II. That I've never got around to transcribing. This question actually reminds me that I really should get around to transcribing that. It's all his adventures, and it reads like you wouldn't believe. And it exists only in that form, so I would hope that that would be safe. Question number 7. A friend borrows a book and returns it in awful condition. Do you A, pretend not to notice, B, ask them to purchase it, or C, take equivalent revenge on one of their books? I don't lend books. I give them away, no matter what they are. If somebody wants to borrow a book from me and I don't want to give it to them, then I say no. That's very rare. Usually if somebody's in my house and they say, oh, this looks really good, I say take it. Or I say, I'll find you a copy and I'll mail it to you. Because this always happens. There's no such thing as a responsibly borrowed book. Just, aside from a library, it just doesn't happen. And it hasn't happened ever in the history of books. If you think about it, the very first book anyone lent to anyone else was God giving Moses the first version of the 10 Commandments. And what did Moses do? He destroyed them. God had to do it again. He's the very first person not to get his book back. But if I had to, I would say, option number B, make them pay for it, is something only a douchebag would do. Option number C, take the equivalent revenge, is something only a douchebag would do. It would be option number A, just pretend not to notice, but strike them off your borrowing list. And that's it. Those are the Bookish Scenarios tags. I could add tons of scenarios to these. But last thing is to tag people. I'm getting a little bit better at that. I would tag Beck at Beck's Books, because I just love watching her natter on about books, and this is a great opportunity for that. I would tag Kristen at ObsessiveGirlFan. Her channel is just sharp, really good. I hope she sticks with it. And I would tag Caroline at CarolineReads, because I suspect that not all of her birds are chirping, if you know what I mean, which means she fits in just fine at BookTube. But as usual, I tag you all. I'm just curious to know the answers to any of these. I'm sure that we've all encountered scenes like this once or twice in our lives. And that's it. That's my Bookish Scenarios tag. Sorry for the length, but I was consoling myself on a book-less Sunday. But I'll be back tomorrow with more books and more to talk about. Thank you, BookTube.